Hey guys, today we're going to be talking about a new resin that we've been trying. We've actually been extensively testing this resin for a company called CPS, or Colorado Polymer Solutions, which is owned by Sartomer, which is an affiliate of another one. It's a big thing. There's like 3 names on the bottles. It gets a little confusing. But if you were to purchase this resin, you would be going to Colorado Polymer Solutions, CPS, link in the description. So this specific resin is called IC163. Not as inventive as some of the other ones that we've heard of, like Power Resins and Apply Labs and stuff like that. It's not very dynamic, but I will assure you that this resin is very good. I just need to disclaim, first of all, that this company only sells to other businesses. So if you're not a registered business, you will not be able to buy this. So if that's it, see you guys in the next video. But if you're still here and you still want to hear about this resin, let's talk about how well it handles printing. So this resin is very specifically designed to work with filigree type of models. Very, very thin, very spindly. We did try printing some heavier models, but they didn't work out so well. I'll go into those details in a little bit. So as per usual with all of our resin testing, we start off with the hollow ball models. And these ones are specifically designed to help us get the right kind of exposure, because we know that there's a set weight for these. We can tell just by looking at it. If it prints this incredibly fine structure, then we know it's going to be good to move on. We used the recommended settings of, I believe it was 9 seconds per layer with a 60-second base layer on our Prusa SL1. And the overall results were really, really good. Now, we did go into further detail and we did test other variations of the exposure levels. And I'm going to get into more detail about that in a little bit. But overall, this resin handles these very slender models incredibly well. The overall structure for these hollow balls is about 0.2 millimeters thick. And there was not a single failure throughout the entire bed. So in trying to stay with our normal resin testing methods, I suppose, we stuck with a more standard print bed. I'm sure you've seen this one before. We've got some snake earrings in here, some very thin, spindly, pronged models, a big, heavy, hollow one. And we didn't actually get great results. What we noticed was these lines going through the model. You can actually feel them if you go over it with like a pin, you scratch at it, and they are actually fracture lines. I don't know the exact reason for it, but it does become addressed later on when you adjust your exposure. If you're running a heavier model, in this case, about 4 millimeters plus thick, and I can tell that because on this one, the tail started to fracture at about 4 millimeters thick. If you don't lower the exposure time to compensate for the thickness, you will get these fracture lines. I'm not entirely sure why this happened, but they do exist and they are a breakage point. Basically, the models just have a failure and then they snap. Now, I just need to bear in mind that this is only when you see the lines, and it's only along those lines, and it's only with heavier models. But since this resin is designed for working with filigree, very thin stuff, let's just assume that that is what we're going to be working with from now on. So after realizing that, I did change up the model bed. I went from the kind of standard one to a much more filigree-centric one. And we've got a whole pile of models here to play with. So one of these I just got off of Thingiverse. This is actually 25% the right size. This is it's actually meant to be like a tea light holder thing. You're supposed to print it large. But I thought, what's closer to filigree than something like this? It's a really nice model and it printed really well. And it was also self-supporting, which is really nice. It's nice to not have to worry about support material. And then, like some of our other models on the other print bed, we stuck with some more stone setting heavy ones. This one's very thin, but it looks large. It's just very thin walls. And that one, again, printed really well. And then we have this one. This is more of a very Baroque type model. And then there's a couple others in here as well. But in the end, all of the thin stuff printed immaculately well. And we did test this between the 5-second and the 9-second exposure times. So moving on to the casting phase. Now that we had the ideal models, dimensionally, everything else looked really good, we sprued them up and we're going to be casting them in silver. I actually have the kiln running right now, so we'll be running into that very shortly. I sprued them up as per usual with our normal spruing wax. using R&R Plasticast with no additives, so no boric acid. We're also using a small flask, but something to note that I am doing a little different is I've added a little bit more metal to the melter. And the reason for that is when I go to pour the metal, the molten metal has weight and it's going to push down as well as the vacuum pulling from the bottom. So it's hopefully going to give these very thin models more of a chance to come out well. So I'm going to do that cast right now, and I will be right back and show you guys those results. So now that we have cast the IC163 resin, I can safely report to you that this resin casts amazingly. We did our cast in silver, and then I did another follow-up cast in gold, 10K gold, and both of them turned out really, really well. The fact that it's designed for filigree printing specifically means that it has yet another thing to uphold when it comes to its function. It has to be able to burn out cleanly so that all of those little areas, all the details, prongs, etc., will cast perfectly. And it does, which is really, really awesome. So let's take a look at these models and castings. I have some of the extra models from doing multiple print runs, and this is one of the ones that we carry out through a lot of our different designs. This one turned out pretty well. There was a little bit on the other side, and you can see here on the top, a little bit of porosity. I don't attribute that to the resin at all. This is mostly casting issues in any of these models. This next one is a leopard, and this one's like full of micro pave, and it turned out okay. There's a little bit of issues on the bottom there, but nothing, again, that I would attribute to the resin. This one's really difficult. I've never cast this one before, but it's really, really solid. I like that every single prong turned out. That's a great feature of this resin. And the likeness is really, really good. There was a couple of little minor details, but I mean, after you set stones and stuff, a lot of those little things will get worked out. And on this one, we have the hands. This is like a one-to-one perfect replica. There's no difference whatsoever. Turned out perfectly, even all the little print lines. A little bit of porosity here on the side, but again, nothing too major that you couldn't fix. And the Baroque one. This one I'm a little bit disappointed in. It didn't turn out great, and I attribute that mostly, again, to the casting. I should have put an array of supports instead of that one single one. I think that affected how well the prongs came out and some of the designs. Overall, again, I would attribute that to the casting process, not to the resin at all. And finally, we have this ring. This has been a staple in most of our printing. This one, again, just like that Baroque one, I wish I hadn't done just a single rod up the middle. I should have done multiple, like an array. And overall, this one actually turned out really good. There's a little bit of porosity on the sides that, that array wouldn't have fixed, but one of the prongs came out a little bit short, and it could have been a little bit better. So overall, this resin is really, really good. And I would definitely consider using this in the future, especially with thin designs. So that's all for this video. Thank you very much for watching. If you like this content, please like and subscribe. And if you're interested in any of the other resins that we have reviewed and tried, please take a look at those videos because they are available. If you want to see our ranked list, see the link in the video description below. It is on our website blog, where we will be updating various resins as we use them, writing articles and putting in a little bit more information that is relevant to that resin, like printer profiles, other pictures, things that we couldn't fit into the video. So I will see you guys in the next one.